The smell of roasted turkey filled every corner of my parents' house, but all I could taste was dread. Something was wrong. I'd known it the moment I walked in and saw the way Mom kept glancing at Dad, the way my sister Vanessa practically vibrated with excitement at the dinner table. I'm Charlotte, 34 years old, and I own Aurora Boutique, 3 high-end clothing stores in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Greenwich. I'd started with one small shop 5 years ago using my trust fund from my late grandmother, and through brutal work weeks and careful expansion, I'd built something real. Last year's revenue, $2.8 million. Vanessa, my 29-year-old sister, had a different story. She'd burned through her own trust fund in 18 months on a sustainable fashion startup that sold exactly 12 items before collapsing. She'd been living with our parents ever since, rent-free, working part-time at a yoga studio. 44 people crowded into the dining room and overflow seating in the living room. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years, family, friends, even the neighbors from 3 doors down. This wasn't our usual Thanksgiving crowd of 15. Dad stood up before dessert, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "Everyone, I have an important announcement." My stomach clenched. As many of you know, Charlotte has been very successful with her clothing stores. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And Vanessa has been going through a difficult transitional period after her business venture didn't work out. Vanessa looked down, playing the role of humble, struggling daughter. I'd seen this performance before. After much prayer and family discussion, Mom added, standing beside him, "We've decided that Charlotte is going to sign over Aurora Boutique to Vanessa. It's time for Charlotte to slow down anyway. She's not getting any younger and she should be thinking about marriage and children. Vanessa needs this opportunity to rebuild her confidence." The room erupted in surprised chatter. My cousin Michelle actually gasped. Uncle Robert set down his wine glass hard enough that it sloshed. I sat perfectly still, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Vanessa stood up, tears already forming in her eyes. "Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much. I promise I'll make you proud. I've already been thinking about rebranding strategies and—" "No," I said quietly. The word cut through the noise like a knife. "What?" Mom's face paled, then flushed red. I said no. "I'm not signing over my business." I set my fork down carefully, precisely. "To anyone." Dad's face darkened. "Charlotte, we've already discussed this as a family." "You discussed it. I was never part of this conversation." I looked around the room at 44 faces staring at me. "When exactly did you plan to ask me?" "We're asking you now," Mom said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I knew so well. "In front of everyone who loves you. Everyone who has supported you." "Supported me?" The laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Let me tell you about support." Vanessa's tears were flowing now. "Charlotte, please. I made mistakes. I know that. But I've learned so much. I just need one more chance." "You've had 6 chances," I counted on my fingers. The sustainable fashion line. The organic skincare company. The artisanal coffee subscription. The handmade jewelry business. The vintage clothing resale. The wellness retreat planning. 6 failed businesses in 7 years. "Those were learning experiences," Dad interjected. "Your grandmother would want you to help your sister." The mention of Grandma Rose made my chest tight. "Don't you dare use her name to manipulate me." "We're not manipulating anyone," Mom said, her voice rising. "We're trying to save this family. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a daughter living at home at 29? What will people think?" I gestured to the packed room. "You invited 44 people to watch you pressure me into giving away my livelihood. You want to talk about embarrassing?" Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe this should be discussed privately." "No," Dad said firmly. "Charlotte needs to understand that family comes first. She's being selfish and everyone here should see what kind of person she's become." "Selfish?" My voice remained calm, but my hands were shaking. I clasped them in my lap. "I employ 23 people. 23 people who depend on my business for their paychecks, their health insurance, their kids' braces and college funds. They'll still have jobs under Vanessa," Mom said dismissively. "Will they?" I looked at my sister. "Vanessa, what's the average profit margin for a boutique clothing store?" She blinked. 15%? 7 to 12% for independent boutiques. Mine runs at 11. I turned back to my parents. Vanessa, what's our biggest operating expense? Inventory. Rent. Manhattan retail rent. I stood up slowly. You want to hand my stores to someone who doesn't know basic industry metrics? She'll learn. Vanessa cried. You can teach me. We can work together. Like your sustainable fashion line, where you spent $40,000 of your trust fund on inventory without researching suppliers first and ended up with unwearable fabrics. Her face crumpled. Or your skincare company where you didn't check FDA regulations and got slapped with violations? That wasn't my fault. It's always someone else's fault with you. I grabbed my purse. I need some air. Charlotte Elizabeth Morrison, you sit back down, Mom commanded. We are not finished. Actually, we are. I walked toward the kitchen, pulling out my phone. Mom followed me. You are destroying this family. Do you understand that? Your sister is drowning and you're standing there with a life preserver, refusing to throw it. I scrolled through my contacts with shaking fingers. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. I pulled away and dialed. The phone rang twice. Charlotte? Happy Thanksgiving. Robert Chen's voice was warm, familiar. He'd been my financial advisor and investor since I opened my second location. Robert, I need you to come to my parents' house. Now, bring whatever documentation you have about our investment agreement and the business structure. What's wrong? I glanced at Mom, who was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face a mask of fury. My parents are trying to force me to transfer ownership of Aurora to my sister. In front of 44 witnesses. Silence. Then, I'll be there in 40 minutes. I'm bringing David. David Chin, his son, was an attorney specializing in business law. Thank you. I hung up. Who was that? Mom demanded. Someone who actually understands business. I walked past her back into the dining room. The 44 faces were still there, watching. Dinner had stopped. Turkey congealing on plates. Conversations died as I entered. Charlotte has called in reinforcements, Mom announced dramatically. Rather than have an honest family conversation, she's bringing in outsiders. You made this public, I said evenly. You invited 44 people to witness what you thought would be my surrender. They can witness the truth instead. Dad stood up, his face purple. You ungrateful. Ungrateful. The word burst out of me. I've paid for this house's roof replacement. $34,000. I paid for your cruise to Alaska last year. $8,000. I paid Vanessa's rent for the 8 months she lived in Williamsburg. $28,000. I've bought groceries, paid utility bills, covered car repairs. That's what family does, Dad said. Yes. But family doesn't ambush each other at Thanksgiving and demand multi-million-dollar businesses. I pulled out my phone again, opening my banking app. Want to know how much I've given this family in 5 years? $127,600. Documented. Every transaction. Cousin Sarah's jaw dropped. Uncle Robert was staring at Dad with an expression I couldn't read. We helped you too, Mom said desperately. We believed in you when you wanted to open your first store. You told me I was being reckless and stupid, I corrected. You said I'd fail within 6 months. Grandma Rose's trust fund was the only reason I could start. Your grandmother left money to both of you girls, Dad said. And I built a business. Vanessa burned through hers on ventures she never researched, never planned, never treated seriously. I looked at my sister. I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. You're not ready for this. You could make me ready, Vanessa whispered. You could mentor me. I tried. Remember when you worked at my Brooklyn location last year? You lasted 3 weeks before you said retail was beneath your creative vision. She flushed. I was going through something. You're always going through something. The doorbell rang. Dad moved toward it, but I was faster. I opened the door to find Robert Chin, a distinguished man in his 60s, and his son David, early 30s and dressed in a suit despite the holiday. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, Robert said politely as he entered. I'm sorry to interrupt your Thanksgiving. Dad's face had gone from purple to gray. He actually stumbled backward a step, catching himself on the doorframe. Who are you? Mom demanded. Robert Chin. I'm Charlotte's primary investor and financial advisor. He set his briefcase on the entry table. And this is my son, David Chin, attorney at law. David nodded politely, but his eyes were sharp, taking in the crowd of witnesses. This is a family matter, Dad said weakly. Actually, sir, it became a legal matter the moment you attempted to pressure my client into transferring business assets. David pulled out a folder. Could we sit down? The dining room had never been so silent. Robert and David took seats at the table. I sat between them. Robert opened his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon. Let me explain the situation to everyone. Charlotte owns 60% of Aurora Boutique. My investment firm owns 40%. Any transfer of ownership requires unanimous approval from all stakeholders. He pulled out a contract. Per our agreement signed 5 years ago, Charlotte cannot sell, transfer, or gift her shares without my explicit written consent. Mom sank into her chair. You never mentioned investors. You never asked about my business structure. You just demanded I hand it over. David took over. Additionally, Aurora Boutique carries significant debt, loans, vendor contracts, lease agreements totaling approximately $1.8 million. Transferring ownership to an individual with no business experience and a history of failed ventures would be considered fraudulent conveyance. Fraudulent. Vanessa's voice came out as a squeak. Transferring assets to avoid creditors or without fair consideration can constitute fraud. David's voice was professorial. In this case, asking Charlotte to transfer a viable business worth approximately $3.2 million to someone unqualified would expose Charlotte to legal liability. Robert pulled out another document. I also have here the employment contracts for Aurora's 23 employees. Each contract includes a change of ownership clause that allows them to exit with severance if management changes hands without proper transition planning. He looked around the room. If Charlotte had signed over the business tonight, she would owe approximately $380,000 in immediate severance payments. Did anyone consider that? Silence. Furthermore, Robert continued, Charlotte's personal assets, her apartment, her car, her savings, are all currently collateral for business loans. Losing the business would trigger default clauses that could result in total financial ruin. Mom's wine glass trembled in her hand. But you said she should give it away, Uncle Robert said quietly to Dad. You said it would be easy. Dad said nothing. Robert turned to Vanessa gently. Ms. Morrison, I mean no disrespect, but could you tell me what Aurora's current inventory turnover ratio is? Vanessa stared at him blankly. Gross margin versus markup? Nothing. Do you know what a P&L statement is? Profit and loss, she ventured. Have you ever created one? She shook her head, tears streaming now. Robert closed his briefcase. I cannot, in good conscience or legal standing, approve the transfer of a multi-million-dollar business to someone who cannot answer basic financial questions. Charlotte's grandmother trusted her with seed money because Charlotte had a business plan, market research, and 3 years of retail management experience. He looked at my parents. Your daughter built something remarkable from nothing. And you tried to take it from her because it was convenient. The silence was deafening. David stood. Charlotte, you have options. We can file a restraining order preventing future harassment about business transfers. We can also explore whether tonight's public coercion constitutes attempted fraud. I don't want to sue my parents, I said quietly. Then don't, Robert said. But set boundaries. This ends tonight. I stood up. I love you both. But I'm done being your A-team. I'm done being the backup plan for Vanessa's failures. I'm done being bullied into giving away what I've earned. We're your parents, Mom whispered. Then act like it. Be proud of me. Support me. Stop treating my success as something to be redistributed to make yourselves feel better. I grabbed my coat. Vanessa looked up, mascara streaking her face. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I really am. I didn't understand what they were asking you to give up. I know, I said. And I did. Vanessa wasn't malicious. Just entitled. Enabled. Maybe I could work for you, she said hopefully. Like actually work. Learn the business properly. We'll talk, I said. After you get some real retail experience somewhere else first. I walked toward the door. Robert and David followed. As we reached the porch, I heard Dad's voice, small and broken. We just wanted to help her. You destroyed her, Uncle Robert replied. Both of them. In different ways. I drove to my apartment in Brooklyn, ordered Chinese food, and spent Thanksgiving night reviewing my business plans for the next quarter. 2 weeks later, Vanessa got a job at Macy's. Entry level. She worked there for 8 months before I let her transfer to Aurora's Brooklyn location. As a sales associate, not a manager. My parents and I didn't speak for 6 months. When we finally did, Dad apologized. Mom took longer. But I never, ever paid their bills again. And Aurora Boutique? We opened our 4th location the following spring. Sometimes the best thing you can give your family is the truth. Even when it shatters.